Thanks everybody for joining today. It's a pleasure to be at LSI. I first came here last year, just really engaged by seeing all the emerging companies and all the new technologies. I'm really excited to be part of this journey with you. And we'll talk a little bit about the role we've played in the ecosystem and the role that we all continue to play to make healthcare better. Bryant, Zanko, I'm responsible for corporate business development. I've been at Stryker for 20 years. I came over from PepsiCo, where I was responsible for the Americas for our food businesses there, and been on the part of this journey with my colleagues here. So I'll turn it over to Adam Wollowick.
Thanks, Bryant. Adam Wollowick. Nice to see some familiar faces out in the audience and a lot of new ones. I lead business development for trauma and extremities at Stryker. I've been with the company about 9.5 years. I spent most of that time in spine and enabling technologies, and my background is as an orthopedic spine surgeon. I practiced in New York City at an academic center for 7 years, got my MBA, and decided to leave clinical medicine behind and join industry.
Nice to meet all of you. We're going down in Stryker experience. So I've been at Stryker like 2.5 years. My name is Siddarth. Joined Stryker through the acquisition of a company called Gauss Surgical a few years ago. And today I'm happy to be leading our AI organization. So we work across all 22 business units, and we're driving some new innovations from the center.
Great. And Emily West, I'm a managing director with Goldman Sachs, part of our healthcare investment banking group, and honored to be here with the Stryker team. So I think we're going to jump right into some questions, if that works. To kind of kick it off here, so we heard in the introduction, Stryker has really invested significant capital in M&A over the last 20 years. And so maybe, Bryant, what do you think has really kind of driven Stryker's M&A strategy and journey?
Well, Emily, first, thanks for being here as our moderator. As I think about Stryker, I think we're only looking really at a short snapshot of the time, really going back from the days of John Brown. M&A has really been in our DNA, and if you look at most of our divisions, at the nucleus of that was an acquisition, and I think we've really continued that. Now, we've put more gas on that with Kevin Lobo and continued to really deploy more capital. It is our preferred focus for our capital deployment, and that combined with, I think, a really deep strategic plan and execution with our teams, and we'll talk a little bit about our decentralized nature. We've really been able to drive, I think, some pretty exceptional growth. So really, again, it's been a journey. It's one that we hope to continue, and super excited again to be here with some of the panelists here and talk about Stryker.
Great. And maybe as kind of a natural follow-up, the key question everyone says is, what do you buy and when do you buy it? And so how do you kind of decide?
It really does start with, so I think it really does start with sound strategy. I'm responsible for, in part, our BD strategy, and really that is the foundation. We really drive an understanding of what our organic as well as our opportunities for inorganic growth at the business unit, division, and group level. And that really is the foundation of where we begin our growth journey with M&A. Obviously, then we combine with that what our capital availability is. We roll that up and then really prioritize that. I would tell you that all sounds really like it all fits, as you know, neatly. But as you know, companies are both bought and sold. And sometimes we've been actually over targets. Wright Medical, which was our most recent large deal, that was 15 years in the making. We were over that target. And that target, Wright Medical, went through so many changes. We did as well with our needs. So I think when those times align, both the buyer and seller, valuation has to align, return metrics, it all has to come together. And I think, it takes a lot of time over target to make that match at the right time with the right target and being ready.
Yep, great. And maybe just double clicking there, valuation. What really matters on valuation? What metrics are you looking at? Are there any kind of internal thresholds that you need to hit?
Well, I think when we think about target selection and that drives valuation, first and foremost, you'll see we're not typically buying value-driven plays. We're a growth company, so all the businesses that we acquire, and I can't really think of an exception, have been growth accretive to Stryker, and that starts with the fundamental approach that we have there. Then from that, we really need to think about margin as well. It's pretty difficult to fix a business that has poor gross margins. We can do a lot below the line, general administrative, sales and marketing, R&D to really drive profitability, but unless we start with a high margin product that's really valued in the marketplace and as evidenced by gross profit, that really is another key driver. And then we need to think about our return metrics. We are phenomenally focused on return on invested capital over time. Now, some of our growthier assets and those that we're building call it a platform around, we will accept longer ROIC, longer economic returns, but we have to see that benefit longer term and ability to have a platform and then bolt onto that. Neurovascular was a great example, although we did really well on that transaction. We then added 2 tuck-in deals, and that's really when we drove profitability and economic profit for ourselves. So all those things really need to come together, and then obviously now we're in a higher rate environment. We have to manage our EPS and our EPS commitments to Wall Street. But again, growth first, and then economic profitability and EPS have to follow as well.
Great. And maybe we can spend a minute on the team that does all this work. And so what can you share with us kind of about how the BD team is organized on the corporate level within the business divisions? I think it's a little bit of a unique setup, so it'd be great
I'll
to
say
hear.
it briefly, and then I'm going to actually turn it to my colleague here, Dr. Wollowick, and he can talk a little bit more from the division's perspective. But again, we want to maintain that market customer intimacy, and that's really goes to how we drive business development. Given the breadth of Stryker now at $20 billion of revenue, I personally don't think it can be effectively driven from the center. So we really depend on market intimacy, and that again happens at the BU level and the division level. So we have teams embedded in each of our divisions that are responsible for driving growth of those divisions and business units. And then obviously we layer in all the really positive things about governance, best practices. We have a BD leadership team. We're constantly collaborating. So although it's very division-centric, we're trying to drive, again, value and understanding and governance across the organization. And I think that's that balance that we're continuing to try to hit. But it might feel a little differently from the perspective of the division, but we try to, corporate at Stryker, we really try to minimize our involvement and really let the businesses run.
Yeah, I think there's a great dynamic between corporate business development and the team that Bryant's put together there that's really sort of supporting, strategizing, amalgamating everything going on. But Sid mentioned, we have 22 business units, and I would say just about everyone, if not everyone, has a business development team. And so that decentralization allows us to have deep connections to the market, customer focus on and relationships with our selling channel. It's not just sort of a marketer that's sitting in there trying to feed up to a big corporate group to make decisions and execute deals. We execute them from the lowest level. And the divisions and the business units have the latitude to invest what they want based on their strategy and how much they expect to do in M&A. So you may have a group that has 1 or 2 people, and you can have groups that have 6 or 7, depending on their deal flow. So we find that flexibility and that, again, the deep connection to those markets, being able to see trends ahead and sort of set the curve is what sets us apart, I'd say.
Great. And maybe we can talk about integration. How does your team kind of approach integration? How do you drive for real value creation with these transactions?
When I started, we were really fragmented. We really did not have a robust approach to integration. We did not have best practices, playbooks. And as a result, I think we under-optimized some of the early acquisitions that we were doing. Now, since then, we've really built up at the center and really shared best practices and tools and templates. In fact, under my team, we have the Integration Center of Excellence now. It's been in an evolution formally for about 5 years, and we have now fully staffed that and really benefiting. Again, it's in partnership, not in substitute or in replace of the division. So the divisions remain responsible for the M&A. They remain responsible for the decisions they make. They remain responsible for the integrations. But what we're here to do is work in partnership to make sure that our integrations are maximizing value. We have that repetition, we have that pattern recognition, we have that learning, so we're not relearning with new team members each time. I think this is going to be, or continue to be, one of our biggest value drivers. And one last commercial. For the first time, I actually hadn't really cued in on this, but we actually had a target come and said our bid was about equal to another, but they felt so comfortable with the way we were going to approach integration that actually it helped tip their decision towards us. that is something I never really thought of as a competitive advantage from winning a deal, but just to hear that, and I've got tremendous partners, Trisha Edgell and others that really I'm super proud of in what we're doing there, because it's really the hard work. We do pretty much the easy work, and it's really the integration that really drives value creation. So really proud of what we've done in there on our team. And I think
Yeah.
Sid, you're probably a good example of how that's worked. And I think well.
Yeah. I think it's a work in progress. Our integration was, heavily, heavily driven by the business unit when it came to product and the sales and marketing aspects of the business. But in our specific case, we discovered, wow, there's this nascent AI capability that makes a ton of sense to take to the center and to leverage across the company. And that too was a collaborative exercise. So it was all about collaboration there and figuring out where those other teams around the company, that there's a similar initiative. And now that there's kind of a bolus and a critical mass starting to take place, does it make sense to integrate this a little differently than, say, your typical acquisition? So yeah, definitely echo what Bryant said.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other points I think that are important. The tremendous amount of time with lessons learned, postmortems, check-ins throughout that are like sort of quote unquote required as part of the process to, as we go through the integration, to make sure that we're hitting everything we need to and things are on tracks. It's this intense focus there. And it's also about, and by the way, then we use that to benchmark, right? A lot of people benchmark financial metrics to the deals. We benchmark integration success. And that's proving to really push a lot of dividends. I think the other thing is we integrate integration at the earliest phases of the deal. It's not even at diligence, it's pre-diligence. The integration planning is already starting to take place. And we no longer approach it, by functional area. It's by sort of what we like to call deal drivers, right? We identify the key parts of the deal that are gonna be necessary for success, put cross-functional groups together, and approach it that way. So everything is based on what's gonna deliver the returns that we expect. And I think that leads to a tremendous amount of success and speed.
Great. And maybe shifting back here to Sid, we can kind of double click as the newest member of the Stryker team via acquisition. What can you tell us kind of about the experience of Stryker acquiring Gauss and going through that acquisition?
Yeah, it was, first of all, it wasn't an overnight success. It was like a 10-year overnight success. I'd say specific to Stryker, and I got to spend a lot of time with a lot of the other great companies in our space, and took sort of a similar hands-on relationship building approach. But I'd say specifically with Stryker, what I saw early and then was able to cultivate mutually was a commitment from the business or the businesses that were looking at our asset or our company, a commitment to really understand how and when this new kind of product that we had launched into the market might make sense for Stryker. So it was, I think, end to end, a 7.5-year arc from the first meeting I had with one of the BD teams at Stryker to the day we signed a merger agreement. And along those 7 years, we saw folks that moved out of the business and then came back to that business in a different role. There's a lot of seismic shifts because it's a very dynamic
The only constant
environment.
was you, Sid.
That's right.
No, right. Yeah, I held the strategic plan for that BU in my mind. But what was incredible is along those 7 years, not only was it about building relationships, it was about cultivating, I call it the front row seat to our little story as a company. All of the key people in that business unit that I knew would have to really understand the different aspects of our business to buy it and integrate it, they had almost as much information as my board. And I'm really not saying that lightly. We'd redact confidential things and then we'd send the board deck, in effect, to the BUs every quarter. We'd cultivate these dialogues about that business unit's own strategic plan and where they might see this digital and AI piece coming into play. And for quick context, so the product was a way to measure surgical bleeding using an iPad and computer vision and AI. And the business unit that acquired us was the surgical technologies business, which focuses on patient and provider safety. So it has major products like the surgical sponge counting product line, SurgiCount, which is a SoCal-based company, came out of Irvine actually, and the Neptune device, which is the big suction system. It's the leading fluid waste management system in the market. So, it was really about us building a story together as to when these 3 or 4 products would finally fit together and match. And that took 7 years, as most major portfolio decisions do, for it to really sit right and for all the different pieces to be in place. And so I just had to not die, basically, along that 7-year period.
We're glad you didn't. But I think that's why we come to events like this. I mean, some people do what my meeting with Stryker. We don't give an equity investment or something. Why are you here? Why am I talking to you? But it's because we need to start to cultivate those relationships now that translate in a few years into something meaningful. And as Bryant said, many deals that we've been over targets for 5, 7, 10 years, and then end up pulling the trigger. So.
Yeah, I know you touched a little bit on integration, but maybe just kind of a double click there. What can you tell us about, what's kind of changed since you've joined Stryker? What about retaining some of your own team and how you've been able to kind of keep a lot of that team together?
Yeah, sure. Definitely my wardrobe has changed substantially, at least a small part of it. I would say, yeah, wow. Going from 50 people to 50,000 people, like what a... it was truly mind-blowing. It is, like, honestly, every day I spend at Stryker is mind-blowing. And when I'm not questioning why they still keep me around, I'm sort of questioning, wow, how does this all work in such an incredible, fast-paced way, despite the size and the magnitude? So a couple of things. I'd say culture and strategy were, if you sort of split those apart, I think there were a lot of similarities in terms of our core values as a small startup, the one that we built, and what Stryker espouses. There's deep customer focus. We care deeply about our people. And it really does, I'm not making this up, it feels like a family, like when you walk up to someone in a Stryker jersey, or we all know each other. There's so much collaboration despite how decentralized the company is. And ultimately, it's that driven aspect. It's a growth company first. There's this really incredible amount of drive you see across all your colleagues. So it resonated with our startup culture. It resonated with the team we had out of the Silicon Valley. We have not lost a single person since 2.5 years ago. And I can tell you, it's not because of some, golden handcuffs or comp plans or whatever. It's really because of the mission, the kind of work we're doing, and the people we get to work with. It's just a larger team. So culturally speaking, I say the learnings have been a couple. The first one is decisions. They actually get made almost as fast as we used to make decisions in the startup. We'd make 5 poor decisions or ill-timed or just straight up bad decisions. Then we get to the right decision. In that same time scale, Stryker will make the right decision 95% of the time about whatever it is, a program, a deal, a customer. And the ingredients of that decision, though, are manyfold. There's probably 10 times as many constituents and stakeholders that go into each of those strategic or operating decisions. And so once our team sort of figured out that gravity, that new set of parameters that is this larger company that operates at such a bigger scale, I think things became a lot more doable and easy, and we sort of got back into that pace we were used to. And then on the strategy piece, creating a central AI organization was a very strong strategic move from the top and was shared across many BUs. And it was almost like a circular thing. So creating this organization was the way of retaining this organization. And it was also a way of launching the company into an incredible new set of futures that I know many of you that I've even spoken to in the audience are part of this journey almost with us. You're exploring AI and digital and enabling tech in healthcare. And then more specifically, it was a funding behind it. So this is, it's an effort that's got true buy-in from the businesses. There's deep engagement from our business units, and there's real funding and support. So those two pieces really backstopped why it's been so, quote unquote, successful in terms of retention and just keeping that seed alive and letting it grow.
And I think part of that time over target is figuring out the detailed culture of the potential company that we're going to acquire and making sure there is a really strong fit there. And if there's a disconnect, we just know it's not going to work. And so we spend a ton of time trying to assess that. And then I think on the back end, it's taking this massive matrix that Stryker is, right, and making it seem small, right? And we figured out through some failures how to do that. And so being able to integrate people in very quickly but smoothly and in a really kind of user-friendly manner is another huge piece of the success.
Great. And maybe, Adam, we'll shift to you, kind of your journey to Stryker. You were a successful spine surgeon at Montefiore, and what kind of led to the decision to join Stryker BD?
Yeah, thanks. So, when I was in practice, I was sort of looking around and, seeing what the future was going to look like for me. And at that point, I was about 5-6 years in and was sort of saying, okay, how many more ACDFs and TLIFs can I do? And is this going to continue to stimulate and drive me? At the same time, I felt like I didn't have enough reach out there, right? I was treating however many patients I could see in the clinic a year and however many surgeries I could do, but I wanted to do more. And so thinking about leaving clinical medicine, but yet having a connection to orthopedics, to spine, and being able to potentially touch more lives by being able to bring technologies to market, identify technologies earlier, and either bring them into Stryker or help them get where they needed to go became really important to me. So I went and got an MBA, an executive MBA, while I was practicing. It was like having 2 jobs, 2 weekends a month, and then I took a huge leap of faith. I literally quit my job as a surgeon before I had anywhere to go and started talking to VCs, private equity, investment banks, anyone who I could talk to, and frankly, wasn't finding any success. And then I had a good relationship with Stryker and knocked on the door, and turned out they were looking for someone to do M&A in spine, which was my wheelhouse as a spine surgeon. So it was a perfect fit. And people say, "Oh, you're in the right place at the right time." And I always say, "No, I was in the perfect place at the perfect time," and it's all worked out. So it's been quite a run.
Yeah, and it's quite our BD team. It's really interesting. We come from such different backgrounds, but we complement each other. Areas that I have weakness are supplemented by people that have deeper clinical knowledge or technology knowledge. It's a really phenomenal place. I so engaged. I've been here 20 years and just so happy to have partners like us that we can rely on each other. It's been great. So yeah. I'm so glad you're not operating anymore.
Me too. Yeah, no, the collaboration across the senior members of the BD team is unbelievable. And someone comes to me with something that's a neurovascular and endoscopy, and I make sure it gets to the right place, and we share best practices and pick up the phone and call each other all the time, and it really makes it hum.
And just to add to that, so from the perspective of the seller or the company that's looking for a strategic partnership, that also means that when a target comes to like 50 people at Stryker, they're all talking about how that target came to 50 people at Stryker. So what I think has worked really well is when, and I live this myself as a target, what works really well is when you go and focus your dialogues on the right people, or you endeavor to find that right operating unit that really has the market experience and the need to look at what you're doing, right? And not to cast like a super wide net and just talk to anyone you can. You'll typically get steered towards the right folks, and that works really well, I found.
Yeah.
Great. And maybe, Adam, we can spend a little bit of time, your work in the spine BD division and leading that, and kind of some of the achievements you had in spine and kind of some of your goals within T&E now. Be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, obviously, I mean, for me, getting K2M done was huge. Stryker had been looking to make a big move in spine for a while and had assessed a number of targets in the space, and was fortunate that I was able to come in and lead that deal, working through the strategy behind it, and not only leading the deal, but also then leading the integration of K2M into Stryker. It totally transformed our business, everything from portfolio, but also we relocated headquarters to Leesburg, where K2M was. Eric and Lane Major came in, which, again, sort of maybe not the typical paradigm of having the acquired CEO and second in command stay on, but it was an absolutely key move, especially going back to that cultural piece. We knew we had to preserve a lot of K2M culture while integrating in and bringing Stryker's best practices. So that was it was I think a really sound move and worked out well and paid dividends for us. In terms of T&E, it's a very different dynamic. T&E at Stryker is about 3 times as big as spine is. And so I've got 3 massive business units that are all hungry, and they're all leading, right? We have tremendous positions in all 3 areas, trauma, foot and ankle, and shoulder, following right and Tournier. So now it's about being, I think, a bit more of, a visionary of sorts, right? And because I've got visionary teams and leaders that are looking not only to do that internally, but to bring innovation in through M&A. And so, while we're always thinking about the next 2, 3, 4 years and what deals we can do then, we're also already starting to think about what deals are we going to do 5, 6, 7 years from now, and what technologies are going to change the game in trauma so that we remain number one and expand our share rather than contract it. So that's how we're looking at it. So we're trying to go big and go futuristic.
Great. Maybe we'll move forward to kind of venture capital investing. Stryker doesn't really participate in terms of traditional kind of VC investing, but you have done some earlier stage acquisitions. And so what can you talk about kind of that strategy and how that impacts your M&A?
Yeah, we've absolutely done pre-revenue, pre-approval M&A, obviously structured at that point, milestone driven. But as you mentioned, we don't do corporate venture capital, and it's something that I think is good housekeeping, is to keep reassessing that. But our experience has been, and I think our point of view is that the ecosystem that we live in, that there's important roles that each of us can play in the ecosystem, and there's a role for early stage, there's a role for incubators, there's a role for late stage growth capital, and there's a role for us as acquirers. I think we know what we do well, and I think we've benefited by kind of sticking to our knitting. Now, part of this is also a function of which segments we operate in. We're not in cardio. We are in interventional medicine with neurovascular. But this might change over time. We might have to go earlier in our M&A, and this might change as we push farther into areas like AI. I don't see it right now at this point. What that does do, though, to all of us and the BD teams specifically, and our R&D teams and our marketing teams, is we trade. I think we think of ourselves as trading monetary capital for human capital and market knowledge. So you'll see, as we've talked about, we have relationships with our target companies for a decade or more. And what is that relationship like? It's the constant check-in. Do you need access to one of our R&D members? Do you want to talk to one of our clinical regulatory folks? As you're thinking about your trial, what might be some of the things that we would be thinking about as an acquirer? Checking in on quality system and the evolution of that. Ultimately, that's going to need to be rigorous. So what we do is to try to provide that connectivity. It may not be in the form of a board seat, but it's in the form of that constant interaction, so that we understand you better, you understand us better as you get to that point where an exit might make sense. And that, I think, just again, that trust helps to build that marriage, and then helps also to bridge us to integration, because now we've kind of been, I don't want to say we're in the car with you, but we've been watching your journey intensely, and we want to be a partner with you. And I think it just helps. It puts a lot of pressure on us and our team members, but I think that's one of the reasons why we've been successful.
Great. Maybe Sid, a question for you. You're kind of the leader of the new team DRE within Stryker. Can you kind of share with the group what is DRE, what's kind of the role, especially in terms of M&A, and how you guys think about it?
Sure, happy to. I'm one of the 3 leaders of DRE. DRE is led by our president of digital robotics enabling technologies. We call it DRE internally, Robert Cohen. And so DRE is today comprised of 3 operating sort of units. One is AI, one is digital infrastructure, and one is robotics and enabling technologies. So obviously the robotics enabling tech piece is a lot of our Mako R&D and navigation, guidance. Digital platforms is really about cloud connectivity, product security, privacy, the governance related to many of those aspects, working closely in collaboration with IT, which is a totally separate organization. And then the AI team, we're more focused on digital innovations that productize some sort of AI at the core, but really we focus on product launches with our BUs. So we have an AI research team. We have these brainiacs with PhDs, and sometimes it's kind of like stalking the startup companies. We stalk the PhDs as well, and have our ways of staying very close to the academic community. But we've really built a center of excellence in AI research, and then a very strong engineering team that can go all the way to an FDA-cleared digital product, working closely with those AI folks, and then working closely with our business units. The goal of Dre was really a couple of things, right? One is to look at these emerging nascent areas of technology where, for instance, we may not have mature enough companies to acquire, or markets that are well developed yet. So things like mixed reality, spatial computing. We actually launched the first Apple Vision Pro application for really any medical or healthcare use with our Mako platform just a few weeks ago at WOS. So new emerging sort of platforms that we have a lot of conviction in with each business, but maybe it's a little too futuristic for any single business to focus deeply on. And then the second area is almost what I call tech blocks, or these common areas. If you look at pre-planning as a core technology, and AI assisted automated pre-planning and segmentation and insights coming off of any sort of radiologic image, that's something we need across so many of our businesses. And it kind of doesn't make sense for each BU to go build a bespoke solution. So we try to build a platform at the center and then fine tune it, if you will, to use an AI term, for those different BUs and use cases. And then lastly, I'd say, we are big fans of BD and inorganic activity. We work very closely with Adam, with Bryant, and with a lot of our other BD leaders in helping evaluate some of the new AI-driven companies that are very much maturing and starting to get on the radar of our operating businesses. We also, in some cases, might help do a creative sort of a deal structure. We've done SDK agreements and license agreements and per-click fee API agreements with nascent startups where they have a core technology block that we may want to buy instead of build, and then scale across our different product lines and programs without having to, go down the longer term BD path, which can certainly be run in parallel. So we're always thinking about these emerging areas like AI, spatial computing, and of course, robotics enabling tech, a huge focus for us, and working collaboratively, with our BD and corp dev teams.
Great. I know we're almost at time. Maybe just any last words of advice for maybe folks in the audience who are looking to work with the Stryker BD team.
I just wanted to say thank you again for being here. We've talked a lot about ourselves and our journey. We look forward to talking to all of you, the journey you're on. Hopefully those journeys come together at some point, and that we have a chance to work together. But I really appreciate your being here and the engagement. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Wollowick.
I think a couple things. I think patience with us, in the one hand, again, this whole time over target, right? You're going to get frustrated I got to meet with Stryker again. They want to meet, we just talked 6 months ago, and I know they're not going to, maybe invest in my Series A or something. But, those touch points, as Sid was saying earlier, are so critical for us. So work with us, be transparent with us. We try to be very transparent back to you, so you should know exactly where you stand with Stryker. But be transparent with us. Tell us where you're at. What inflection points have you hit, and where are you on your particular journey, so that we know and we can activate, because we can move quickly when we need to. And lean on the BD team. I think there's a tendency to say, I emailed Adam and he told me there was no interest, so then you email Kevin Lobo, right? It's not hard to figure out kevin.lobo@stryker.com.
No, you shouldn't have said that. No. That's not his email address.
But, it doesn't get you anywhere, right, at the end of the day. So
That's true. It just ends right back
it just
on
means
my
that
desk.
he's going to email Brian, who's going to email my boss, who's going to email right? And then and you're just gonna end up talking to me again. So like work with the BD team. We're not entirely unfriendly. And so and
Maybe some of us.
some of us are, maybe some more than others. But I think that's the key, is to kind of work with us. Let's get on the journey together. Starting at the earliest days, like as Sid described his journey, and you never know where that ends up.
I would just echo everything Adam said and just tell everyone that I've witnessed it. I bear witness the process works. It's very thoughtfully built, and you learn a ton by engaging with this crew in particular. And I think I'm biased a little bit, but I think Stryker ran just an impeccable process. It was maddening at times when it was a sort of a sudden ramp up, and then we got to ramp down. A sudden ramp up, and we got to ramp down. But the learnings that happened, the cultivation that happened, looking back on all of it, every single one of those points, those KPIs, I used to track them in a spreadsheet. Every single one of those touch points and deep, meaningful interactions had something to do with pushing the overall strategic thinking forward. So,
Great. I think we're at time, but we really appreciate everyone's time, and thank you guys.
Thanks.